Hello and welcome to another Keyframe Coach review. So we have got a walk cycle animation here from Seth. Seth says, "Hey Owen, I'm a motion graphics animator looking to expand my skills into character animation. This walk cycle was created in Blender and my goal is to do a determined walk. I feel like the animation is generally solid, but I can still feel it's not great, and I'm eager to learn what I might be missing, both mechanically and in terms of storytelling. I'd love feedback on the technical aspects of the walk and how well the determination comes through, as well as any suggestions on how I can push that emotion further. Thanks." Cool. So, without further ado, let's have a look. So, big thing we're looking for is determination. Now, I've already made some notes. I've already done some drawovers, but let's have a look through first and see what we think. Okay, so it's generally pretty good. I think it's definitely along the right lines. There's a few things I thought maybe you could push or things you could just adjust slightly. I always struggle to give feedback with a walk cycle because you could just tweak things into being something totally different, but I'll try and keep it the essence of what you have done here and just try and improve upon that where we can. But like I said, sometimes I think walk cycle notes can sort of go into, oh, why don't you just like delay this or change this timing, and then it kind of becomes a totally different walk cycle. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the notes I wrote. So one thing that stands out, and I kind of frame by frame, is just on these contact poses. I'm kind of looking at where if this is the kind of big mass of the body, then I really need to just color that in, do I? But I guess I have. Okay, so if that's the big mass of the body, then your kind of balance kind of needs to be, it feels like where I've drawn this red line is kind of where the balance should kind of be. And you notice that the legs are just slightly further back. And I'm not saying it needs to be like perfectly central, but maybe if the feet were a bit more in these positions, then things would just feel a little more balanced. It would also kind of help to alleviate the problem you're getting here of that straight leg at the back. So yeah, I guess that's just a quick draw over. Getting this leg a bit further forward and this leg also a little further forward. Get rid of that bend, and will also kind of help to just make things feel a little more balanced, and like the center of his like total mass is a bit more over the center of his feet there. So another thing that kind of stood out is those straights at the back and how long we're kind of holding them. And seeing the leg, it's just kind of a straight for a very long time, and we're then quite quickly having to do a big spacing change in the knee when we come forward. And see how we kind of just pop forward, and like most of the spacing happens in just a few frames, and then we're quite still again when we get here. So you have this stillness at the back and the stillness at the front, which just I'm all for pushing spacing, but things just end up sticking a little that way, and you could maybe improve that by, like I said, just bringing that leg a bit further forward. It might just create this little bit of bend, and then as that bend happens, as that bend turns into a straight gradually over a few frames, it just gives the knee a slightly different, the knee and the upper thigh and the lower leg all different spacings, because you can kind of see when we, as we're transitioning through here, we look at these, as that knee is extending and getting longer, these are, you know, giving you a shape change from something like this to a nice straight. But if they're just straight the whole time, then all of these parts, they all have the same spacing, which is not super visually interesting. And also just like create some pops. So it would be nice to just give that somewhere a bit more to go. Maybe if you were here on this kind of frame of the cycle, you know, might help with that balance. Again, in this pose, the leg is back here, then just feels like we're maybe just getting a bit off balance. So yeah, pushing it forwards is the TLDR of that note, and just getting that gradually go from a bend to a straight over a longer amount of frames should help. So another thing I wanted to talk about was pushing this pose, pushing the arm pose. So if you look at this, you know, this note here with the leg, yes, but I was also looking at what the arms are doing, and you're getting this, well, this is a slightly different note, but in between, you're getting this kind of quite lack of storytelling pose, if you like. You know, if you freeze frame this, you can't exactly tell what he's doing from the upper arms. You can tell a bit, obviously, by these legs, but, you know, if we just wanted to push things a bit, this would probably feel a bit more stompy, a bit more determined. So you could be a bit more cartoony with it probably, and just get a bit more dynamism in the upper body. And another thing that will help to alleviate is just things feeling like they don't have a ton of flow. So if you get a bit more of an angle through these, you can essentially, if I just draw all of this with like one line, you can kind of see how it's all kind of flowing into each other as one big circular kind of single line, versus this, which is very much like line, 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 line. It breaks the flow of your pose, and it's less appealing than it could be. See, if we have something like this, we have a nice kind of simple line almost all the way around right to here, in all angles as well. So things in here kind of have, in this pose, you have a kind of issue where you're not seeing like the free masses of the arm as clearly as maybe you could. So if this was maybe a bit more like this, that would be a bit clearer. And then up here, it's just the issue of flow, really, getting that flowing a bit nicer through that. And it'll also just help to create more contrast and push your pose a bit more. So then onto the note of this one, where we have these arms just pretty default, in not default, but not doing a ton through the middle. I would just kind of snap that up a bit more. So if we look at this, kind of see that instead of ever having these poses where they're both just kind of in the middle like this, you're probably going from something which is more here. So that's frame 15. And then probably holding that for a few frames. And then the middle pose is actually favoring that next key. So, you know, this might still be up here, just starting to ease out of that previous pose. And then this middle pose will favor the next key. And then we'll just get into that final pose a bit sooner. So I feel very much like, and it'll just feel a little more cartoony, a little more pushed, and probably be just a little bit more entertaining, and I think will help the determined attitude of your walk. And what another part of this note is to just get a little bit more breakup in those arms. If we look at this without any drawings, it kind of feels like we get to here, for example, and then we're just kind of stuck in that angle. And it's similar to that leg note where you kind of get to that straight and you just stay in the straight the whole way, or for a few frames. It's similar to that, where you're getting to this pose and staying in this pose rather than getting there and then continuing to, if you continue to do this maybe, and that arm just, that lower arm had a different spacing to the upper arm, it's just going to create more interest. It's going to create more overlap. It's going to make your animation feel more organic, more realistic. Just all the buzzwords, really. So yeah, any place you can really avoid those limbs sticking in angles, but also in screen space, would be great. So hopefully those drawings kind of illustrate that. You see how we kind of get to this angle, and then on the next pose, this is just this line here that I'm looking at. It's just reaching its final point, and then this line of the lower arm and the hand is doing a lot more spacing. So it creates that nice overlap just for your posing, really. You don't have to worry about like technical things in the graph editor. It's just a posing thing. I mean, you probably would do it in the graph editor, but technically it's a posing thing. Okay, so next note was, so I was just looking at the head. It kind of feels like there's not a ton of up down in the head as you're walking, just getting a bit of overlap in there. And it felt like you could probably do with some. So we just look at that and just focus. I tend to focus on a point like the chin or maybe the eyes, and just kind of look at how they're moving in relation to other things. So again, do they have a slightly different spacing to the way other things are moving? If that neck is starting to come up, is the chin coming this way? So are you getting changes from this to this, for example? I realize I just drew the tiniest thing ever, but you want to feel things kind of, it's almost like if I just act out exactly what I mean, hopefully that will make sense. But rather than, doing this, you're kind of doing everything. Everything is just kind of overlapping and just having different angle changes compared to the rest of it. So I think I drew, a little bit of maybe some difference you could create in the spacing here. Another small note as well was just this neck angle. Feels a little broken in the animation, just like a little bit too rounded. So I would just straighten that out and make it flow a bit more through the body. Kind of see how this line that I've drawn would flow through the back of the spine and things like that. Versus, versus this, we kind of get this line and then we go down. So I would just take a look at the overlap on the head and just get something that's a bit more organic, really. You just take a look at, if I zoom in, you probably can't see it on YouTube, but just kind of drew the spacing I maybe imagine. So as the body comes down, the head kind of doesn't do that, the chin at least doesn't do that much spacing, and you would control that with the neck and the rotation of the head. And then we just have a different spacing to the body where the body is pretty low or staying, down, and the head is coming down at a greater rate. It's just creating differences in your spacing, basically. So yeah, hopefully that one makes sense. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, this was just drawing that pose, but on the other side. You see how you kind of get these nice flowing shapes in all angles. So it's not just a case of doing, addressing that note in one angle. It kind of needs to work if you're doing a view like this. It's not that a pose would only work from one angle. if it's a pose like this, it's a pose that can work from every angle. So it's a bit of a challenge to get there, especially if you're just used to working in one view, which I certainly am. But, you know, just hopefully that kind of illustrates that you can have appealing flowing shapes from all angles. Just here. And then I just wanted to talk about the leg timing. And I know I said maybe I want to avoid doing like leg timing and things like that because it changes your cycle a bit, and it does change your cycle a bit. But for me, I felt like something I always like to do in walks, and when something's not working with the feet, this tends to be the thing that I've personally maybe overlooked, but it's kind of holding things before the step down, especially if you're doing like a determined thing. Maybe you want a bit more of a stomp, but it's that thing of, you know, looking at the spacing, and we get quite caught in up here, and then we quickly come down with our leg, and then we're in a straight, in my opinion, a bit too early, and we could just ease that. We could ease into that all a bit more. So, you know, maybe this leg doesn't come through quite as quick. Maybe it's just a bit later. We just give that knee somewhere to go. And hopefully you can kind of imagine what doing this leg move would do to the leg. This foot move would do to the leg. And it would just, if you're kind of tracking an imaginary point here, then it would just make things a lot smoother in the spacing of the knee. Spacing in the knee is very overlooked, I think, but it's something that can give you a lot of information. So for this one, for example, it's giving me the information of things that step should probably happen a little later. Now, that will sort out the spacing of your knee a bit, but I think it will also help to, you know, have a bit more of a held pose. You see how you're holding this pose. You really read this pose of the cycle of that leg being back, but you don't necessarily read that pose. If I just play it through, you don't necessarily read the pose on the other end. So it's kind of, it's giving you that pendulum feel before then stepping down, rather than just coming through and stepping instantly. So it will just give you a little nice hold in there before you then step. Turn my drawings back on. So the drawings tend to be favored like around this area, and we're just going to read that nice, you know, essentially this pose just a little longer. And what this will also do is get your foot a bit further forward, which we needed to do to get this pose working. So then by this point, the pose will obviously be a bit further back, maybe a bit more bent. Just drew scribbles, but you get what I mean. So that also will fix that by moving this further forward. By delaying this, we end up having less time at the back, but also less spacing or less distance back. So we bring the feet forward overall. We get that foot down a little later. And all of those things should help with that straight angle at the back, but also help to just bring a little bit more even spacing to the knee throughout the animation. And I'm not saying make everything just boring and super even, but it's controlling your spacing and making things read super clearly and making things feel really nice and smooth, while also favoring, you know, the pose of the foot. It's a fine balance, but, you know, when you get it right, it's really nice. So just one further thing on that knee, just because I think it's a point worth demonstrating. But if I kind of look at the Spider-Man walking through space, which is a really helpful indicator of, you know, I can maybe look at I can look at this one and maybe go, I think it'll be fine when we're walking through space. And this one essentially has a different spacing to us, like it's a different demonstration of how the animation's working. But then it's handy to put things on this kind of walking through space animation, because then it will demonstrate things in a different way. It will almost give us fresh eyes to what our spacing is doing. So if I just look at how, when things move through space, how things work, you can kind of feel a little stick in the back, especially here on the hill. See how that hill just pops up and sticks there? And you also feel just like all of this line just stick before then coming off. So that kind of demonstrates to me that we need to fix something in the spacing a little there, which, as we said before, was probably having this foot just a bit further forward, so that it has longer to ease out into the final straight, which in my opinion is here, but it wouldn't be this far back and it wouldn't be this straight. It would just be, because it's a walk cycle, you're not doing, when you have like a run, you might have these kind of takeoff poses where things are, super, just trying to draw with one stroke. But you have these long straights and you have these really pushed poses. But on a walk cycle, you don't necessarily need to go that pushed with the straight. That's why I say a walk cycle is harder than a run cycle, because it's just so unforgiving. If you do something with your spacing, then it's just be a bit of a, it's just a painful one for sure. I felt like my walk cycle tutorial was super like, oh, now I need to fix this and now I need to fix this. But it's like, if I just planned it and done it properly, probably wouldn't have had those issues. But walk cycles are hard, and it's just fixing one thing, tweaking something else, and then going, oh, I broke that again, fix, break it, fix, break it, and then you end up with what you want. But anyway, I was looking at the knee spacing here, so you can kind of see how we're coming down and then coming across with that spacing, and then we get a bit stuck through there. You see how that knee comes back again. So I just wanted to look at maybe what that knee spacing should look like. So I drew what I think would be slightly better for that knee. So hopefully this all makes sense, but you can kind of see how we don't have as much back and forth through there, and it's just a lot more simple. So then all we would do to match that is, essentially have, maybe this would be a bit more like this. So that's the reason I say to adjust the timing of that leg. And you might find that that does maybe affect the root and the chest and stuff, obviously, but I think it's worth doing because you're getting these big pops in the spacing. Kind of see how you get this big straight and then kind of jerks forward, and then we get into the straight a bit too soon, so it jerks back. So hopefully that won't change your animation, change the essence of your animation too much. And hopefully those things only help what you already have. And they're pretty straightforward fixes. I think I just really wanted to demonstrate things and almost make this like a mini tutorial on how I think about things and why I'm suggesting these things, rather than just saying, oh, don't make the leg straight for so long. Hopefully that's kind of a bit of a deep dive into the notes that I've given. But yeah, overall it's a nice start. I think you could just push the poses a little. favor things a little more, and just, be really careful with that spacing. And if something ever feels off with the legs or the arms or, anything, that will usually, for example, if you looked at this and you were like, okay, he's feeling a little bit off balance when we get to something like this, or I don't know why this pose is feeling so straight for so long, then it's probably an indication of there is an issue somewhere. So anyway, I hope that helps. I'm just waffling at this point. But if you guys are interested in a review, check out Keyframe Coach, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.